All right, welcome back to another episode of the New Labor Movement Show. I am one of your hosts, Troy.
I'm the other host, Ray.
And we are back for another week of talking local law, labor, and politics. So,
all things that affect labor in New York. Sometimes they're local, sometimes they're national, sometimes it's a little bit of flavor sprinkled on everything, right?
The national gets to affect the local, so.
Well, and especially, you know, I know we're trying to be New York specific, and you know what's good as we progress. Next year there's a mayor's race, so we're going to be able to get really into the fine details about what really affects us. But unfortunately, before we get there, we have this this little thing called a presidential election that's going on. That old chestnut.
Next year there's an everybody race. That's going to be exciting for we're going to be lit up for that year.
Oh, think about this. Come after the presidential election, like right after inauguration. That's when New York we get lit, because you know everyone's going to be. I mean, they've already got 9 people who've already kind of thrown their hat in the ring. But they're not going to say nothing or do nothing other than announce until, you know, at least till election day. I guarantee you if Biden wins, then they'll be like, well, you know, we love the president. You know, then they'll start there. But if the president wins, they'll be, but it won't start until probably after that.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into this week's topic then. We are, because like he said, what's focusing on now and coming up is the presidential election. There was a town hall that came up recently where people were got to ask the president questions directly. So we wanted to focus on some of the things they were asking him, the policies that they were actually focusing on.
Hello, Mr. Trump. My question is actually about police reform, and how can we balance common sense police reform without sacrificing public safety in a time when, you know, part of the country is calling to defund the police and actively cheering when they're gunned down in the street, and another part is tired of seeing the lawlessness?
So we have a great senator named Tim Scott from South Carolina, and he had a plan that was very much of a compromise plan, but it was a plan that everybody pretty much agreed to. A lot of Democrats agreed to it, but they wouldn't vote for it. And it was a compromise of a lot of different factors. And it didn't get done, and it should have gotten done. And it could still be out there, could still be resurrected very easily, but they just didn't want to do it. Because I think the Democrats are viewing this as a political issue, and I probably agree with them. I think it's very bad for them, because we're about law and order. We have to be about law and order. Otherwise, you're going to see your cities burn.
Right now, there is kind of a fine line that people have to walk. I mean, obviously, I do think there's always room for improvement. Police aren't perfect, so obviously there are certain things. I think that we, as a society, ask too much of them. What are you supposed to do with the guy who's a danger and may be armed and is saying, no, you're not going to arrest me? Like, how you need to let the cop be able to force compliance in a way that obviously the suspect makes it to jail in one piece and the cop makes it home in one piece.
Agree with all that, because that would help. Like, that's why I said also redirecting some of that money to other agencies that could handle that specifically instead of a cop having to respond to it. Cops are maybe have a more specific role that should be outside of that realm. My question more is when they say is like, what do they mean by restore dignity? What does he mean by restore dignity to the cops? What do you mean by that?
As you tell cops they're not allowed to do certain things, because if I'm a cop and normally I would proactive. I see a couple of kids on the corner. I know it's a hot spot. Shine the light. What's going on? Now I'm not going to do nothing. And what's going to happen is you're going to start reacting to crimes after they happen.
Stop right there. Why shine the light on the kids in the corner? Because you know it's a hot spot. Now you're not going to do nothing. Why? When was it ever said that, you know what, if you're a cop, you see something you think suspicious, you shouldn't investigate crime. You can't speak to something, a hot spot. I haven't heard that from anyone. What I don't understand is when they saying, oh, the cops can't do their jobs no more, they're being handcuffed, they're not being able to do this. I haven't heard of any change in policy that holds them back from doing anything that has to deal with arresting criminals or anything.
Yeah, all right. Yeah. See, the problem is if you notice, most of the time when these things go off the rails, or when people resist arrest. We can agree on that.
Most of the time, I would say.
I mean,
yes.
obviously there are outliers. Listen, you have bad people who do bad things on both sides.
Wait, before you say most of the time before resisting arrest, yes. But I think more of the time that what it happens is from escalation of a situation that didn't need to escalate to that point. Right, but de-escalation, the situation's escalated, and it results in a point where someone is put under arrest that they feel was unjust, and then that's where the problem starts. Escalation of a situation.
Escalation, of course, and a lot of the escalation has to do with the cops. A lot of the escalation has to do with the criminal. Or I don't want to say the criminal, the suspect.
Right.
I want to say criminal because that implies guilt.
Right.
But you can, I would say 99% of the cases where the person either was shot in custody or killed in custody, had they not resisted arrest, they would still be alive. Now, that does not mean that every person who resists arrest has resisted arrest in such a way that lethal force is warranted. I'm not saying that. What I am saying, though, is if the person had not resisted arrest, think about it, 99 out of 100 people, when the cops come over and say, listen, even if you think it's wrong, you're going to curse, you're going to scream, but you're going to put your hands behind your back, you're going to put the cuffs on, you're going to get your day in court, and you're going to make that cop's life miserable with your lawyer. Some people decide, no, they're going to sell it right then and there. And then that's when things get out of control.
People feel there should be more of a reach out to de-escalate and treat each situation equally. And when they feel like it's certain people may be treated one way and certain people treated another. And when you say that you can't use that force, they're thinking of that force being used towards only one side of the coin.
And I can't deny that maybe that is out there. I'm looking like there are bad lawyers, bad politicians, bad phonemen, bad judges. There are bad cops out there. Mm. I think, though, that the vast, vast, vast majority of situations are escalated by the person who the cop interacts with. I was going to say, the reason why I think cops, you're not letting them do their jobs, because when you do more proactive policing where you investigate crime before it happens, you're much more likely to arrest people or at least detain people. And when you limit the ways that you can detain people in such a way that it is, you're no longer, you're afraid that you're going to lose your job or you're afraid you're going to be under the spotlight and you're going to be disciplined, you're not going to put yourself out there as much.
But this is the only thing. They haven't limited the way that cops, the only things that I've heard that they've changed, and I don't think this was a change because it was already banned by the police, was the chokehold. I know they're making it now illegal instead of just making it against the police policy. And then also the one that I heard with not being able to put the knee on the back of the suspect, which I don't know how that's going to work. Because if you're in I would have to look at the law to see what it describes. Because if you're in a fight with someone that you're trying to arrest and you're wrestling for your life, to say if you're going to inadvertently or something put your knee in their back, it's going to be very hard to say you're going to be able to do.
Right. And I think when a cop sees that, he says to himself, instead of putting myself out there, I'm just going to wait. We'll let the crime happen, and I'll come and I'll arrest whoever I got to arrest. I'm not saying it's the way I would do it. I'm just saying you can see where that a guy's not going to put himself out there for no reason, especially if no one's going to have his back. That's all. I mean, some people agree, some people disagree.
I'd like to ask regarding your recent comments about our United States soldiers and referring to them as suckers.
Could you say that again?
Our United States soldiers, referring to them as suckers, and particularly the late John McCain, our prisoners of war, as losers.
Okay. It was a fake statement.
And
go ahead.
Recently requesting to ban amputee veterans from a military parade. How do you expect to win back the support of our military, their families, their friends, and military supporters?
It's easy, because I never made those statements. They were never made by me. They said I stood over the grave of soldiers killed many years ago, And I said they were suckers. I never made that. Do you know we had 26 people as of today come out to say it never happened, and many people were there. Then they said about the rain didn't happen, and that wasn't the reason. The Secret Service said, we have a statement from them, they said that we could not travel because the helicopter couldn't be used. We would not be able to travel.
It's hard because the character definitely has to play some part of it. Obviously, to me, if the guy's a scoundrel but he does the country right, you kind of look the other way. And if the guy's an angel and he does nothing, he doesn't really help you. But those are two extremes. So obviously character does come into it. And I guess it's based on performance. I guess, it's like a football play. Like, if a guy's a drunk, but he throws 4 touchdowns on Sundays, you're much more likely to say, this is his own personal business.
Yeah.
If he throws 4 interceptions, that's another thing itself, right?
Right.
Let's be honest, right?
Right.
This is one of those things that if you support the president, you don't believe he said it, and therefore you believe it's an attack. If you don't like the president, and you know why this works for people who don't like the president? Most people, if you ask them in the dark, they agree with a lot of the stuff he does. They just won't say it out loud. They just don't like the way he does it. But everyone who doesn't like him because of a personality thing. So if you don't like the president because you think he's an a-hole, this fits right into it. You're thinking, yeah, he totally said this. I totally believe he did this. So I feel that they did the source. They had 4 people who wouldn't go on the record, who were fired employees who said he did it. He now has up to, I think as of last count, it's like 20-something people, 14 who were there, who said never happened. But, I guess the only people who really know are the president and the people who ride around him.
Right. Or the people involved, the person who's accusing and the president are the only people that really know.
Right.
Like I'm saying, if I'm in a party and I'm in a room full of people and I say something and come over to and whisper something in somebody's ear and I make a statement to them, everybody in the party could swear I didn't say it, but nobody could know what I said unless they were in my pocket with me.
Right. I think it was more widespread than that, but most of the people who were there say it didn't happen. But obviously there's still 4 people who did say it happened. And unfortunately, we can't verify if they were even in the room or anything. I mean, you don't know. I mean, like I said, it goes more to, do you believe, if you think he's the type of guy who said that, you're going to believe it. If you think he's not the type of guy who said that, you wouldn't believe it. I mean, he's, from what I get, he wants to throw military parades. He's giving them raises. He's really law and order kind of guy. I mean, I find it hard to believe he would say this, but I'm not going to sit here and say 1000% because I wasn't there.
And I say you can't, no one knows, like you said, no one knows what happened between, except the people that accused him and him. But then I look on the other coin and I look at this, I was like, it's not hard to believe he already said the same thing about John McCain. So I was like, it's not a stretch to say, okay, he just said it.
No. And if you're against him, John McCain is your see, my best thing is that they won't go on the record, and he's good to most military people. If you're against him, you're like, John McCain was like a war hero and a POW, and he said some pretty rotten things about him. So, I mean, he was pretty mean to John McCain, no doubt. I can't say he wasn't.
I was like, I mean, and it was, the thing about it too was, if it was John McCain and he would have said, this guy is, something about his shoe, just like a personal insult. But he insulted him along the lines of the military. So it kind of like and that's the best thing too. If you want to get somebody to believe something, you take something that already has like a truthful put to it, and you add to it, and you be like, motherfucker.
You know what the difference is? I think here's the difference. I think the reason why he said about McCain, and I don't agree with it, but just because you're a veteran doesn't make you immune from criticism. But that being said, I mean, he was in a POW camp for 5 years. You got to cut him a little slack. And I think you want to criticize. I mean, I think they were political enemies. And unfortunately, Trump made it about his military career and his politics, when he should have just made it about his politics. Because listen, if you disagree with the man on politics, it is what it is. You're allowed to have a disagreement. But when you drag the fact that he got caught and how, I don't want to be associated with guys who get caught is kind of,
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. It's not a good look.
If you believe it's the president's responsibility to protect America, why would you downplay a pandemic that is known to disproportionately harm low-income families and minority communities?
Yeah. Well, I didn't downplay it. I actually, in many ways, I upplayed it in terms of action. My
Did you not
action was
admit to
very
it
strong.
yourself,
Yeah,
saying that
because
you-
what I did was with China, I put a ban on. With Europe, I put a ban on. And we would have lost thousands of more people had I not put the ban on. So that was called action, not with the mouth, but in actual fact. We did a very, very good job when we put that ban on. Whether you call it talent or luck, it was very important. So we saved a lot of lives when we did that.
There were holes in the ban, and the European ban didn't come for another month.
Well, they were Americans. I mean, the holes in were if you have somebody in China that's an American citizen, we had to let them in. I mean, there were actually some people that said, well, once it got going, they said, wait a minute, that is really a heavily infected place. And we had a case where we had a lot of Americans, they probably had COVID. And we're saying, do we let them into our country? We let them in very carefully. We quarantine them, but we let them in.
This again also comes down to whether or not what your opinion is of the president.
This
I
part,
again,
no. But go ahead.
no, you can listen. I'm saying for me, if you're a guy, and I'm not saying I'm for or against the president. If you are a pro-Trump guy, it does make sense to you that that the president would not get up in front of the American people and say, this is really bad. Things might go really bad, and this, that, and the, because you don't want to cause that fear. That to me, that makes sense. Now,
That would
if
make
I
sense
don't like, if I
in
don't
the
like,
normal world. But go ahead.
if I don't like the president, I can just as easily make the case that maybe he's downplayed because he's worried about his reelection. I can't. Like I said, I can see why he wouldn't say that, and that makes sense to me because think about it. They were trying to. They didn't know what was going on. They were trying to make it, trying to do the best they could, and there was still a run on toilet paper and all that. People going nuts.
No.
Imagine if they had said that this, that, and the other thing. So
Nah,
for me, that makes sense.
It's not for him to try to calm the crowd and keep them from panicking. A lot of the stuff that he does is instigation and inciting emotion. So it's completely the opposite of how he operates. It's more in line with the fact that you would try to downplay it to make sure he can keep himself in a good light. Same thing like when he says that there should be less testing so his numbers don't look bad. All that stuff coincides. And to do that with something as bad and deadly as a pandemic, that part is that's when you start getting into crazy stuff because now you're talking about killing people.
I think words matter, and I think that walking a fine line where there is a fine line between educating the people and keep the people informed and scaring them. Where that line is, I guess, varies from person to person. I still look at his actions. I still look at the fact that I still look at listen, not one person in this country who needed a ventilator or a hospital bed was ever denied. New York, which needed all this extra space, he got it all to them, and they never even used everything to occupancy. The ship set out in the harbor. The Central Park set alone. The Javits Center set there. All things he set up. He did do the China.
No. I was going with you until you said all stuff he set up. He didn't set up any of that. If it was stuff that's coming from the governors as they were putting pieces together and figure out what they had to put in place and asking for it, the federal government provided what they were asking for. But he said afford it.
What happened?
I said it wasn't that he didn't even set it up. He actually fought it. So when they were asking for extra ventilators to be produced, he was saying, "Why do you need so much?" When they were asking for more testing, he was like, "You really don't need to have that much testing." And didn't put a national plan in place. It still doesn't have it now to have the testing done when they said it's the most effective. When they started saying masks,
we spend almost $1 billion a day in testing. We test almost 1 million people a day.
Okay.
1 million people every day.
Okay.
That's that's not nothing. The fact that he got the boat there, the USS Mercy, that was fine. He helped give the money for the Javits Center. So that
you say that like it's a gift. This is stuff that if the federal government this is something that's supposed to do. It's like you don't get brownie points for doing what you're supposed to do.
No one's asking for brownie points, but see, to me, when it seems like the opposition to the president, whoever they may be, is trying to say he did something maliciously. And when you say malicious, it means the intent is to harm the American people, when there's clearly no intent to harm the American people. I think he did everything.
It might not be intent, but that's a gross negligence in order to have something that you feel is more deadly and could be harmful to everyone, and you downplay it at your own, at everyone else's peril, just to make yourself come forward in a better light.
Well, let me say this.
The question more is this, like you said, it's more about actions. So say now he gave that calm speech to the public in order to keep the calm down, but his actions from the point of knowing it was this deadly to giving the speech, if you give the speech to the public to calm them down, behind the scenes, you're supposed to be working ferociously in order to try to make sure that it isn't a harm to the public. That wasn't done.
Well, no, all right. So then I'm assuming you can tell me something that the experts told him to do that he didn't do.
It's not about the experts that told him to do. It's about what was your plan as far as you're the president. What is your plan to get done? My point is also that it's just that between the time so early on that he knew what was happening and the time that they actually began taking this seriously, because even though when they would continue to say it was a hoax and it was nothing and it would go away by itself, 15 cases.
First of all, he never said it was a hoax. He said the fact that the Democrats said he called it a hoax was a hoax. He never actually called it a hoax.
He said
verifiable,
the Democratic hoax, and the Democratic hoax of the coronavirus. Whether he meant it was the severity of it or the way his response to it, the way it could have been interpreted, it was as he was calling.
This is the same argument as find people on both sides. It's been debunked, but that's okay. Though not a fault of Donald J. Trump. He didn't do anything to stop it. He's not a scientist, but he has to own it. And the fact that he has not owned it, if he got up and said, listen, the federal bureaucracy let me down, it let you down. I'm going to try and be better, and here's how I'm going to be better. Yes, the media would crush him for about a week, but the average person would be like this.
Yeah, but you know what? Still,
he won't do that though. Being humble is not his style.
Right, and instead he'll let it like completely burn to the ground instead of just saying,
100%. I mean, the only thing that's going to save him is if he gets himself a vaccine by or around the election. That will help him, because then he'll be able to say, listen, I got a vaccine in like 8 months, and
hey, listen,
that would be something.
For that vaccine to help him with this, I think he's going to have to go in the lab and make it himself.
Within a 36 to 72 hour period without my medication, I will be dead. And I want to know what it is that you're going to do to assure that people like me who work hard, we do everything we're supposed to do, can stay insured. It's not my fault that I was born with this disease.
And we are not going to hurt anything having to do with pre-existing conditions. We're not going to hurt pre-existing conditions. And in fact, just the opposite. They will not do that because they have socialized.
I have to stop you there. I just have to stop you there because it's just on a couple of points. Number one, Joe Biden has ran against Medicare for all in the primaries, but much more importantly, Obamacare guaranteed people with pre-existing conditions could buy insurance, guaranteed they could buy it at the same price as everyone else, guaranteed a package of essential benefits, guaranteed that insurance companies couldn't put a lifetime limit on those benefits. You fought to repeal Obamacare. You are arguing.
Well, I essentially did,
You're
because we got rid of the
arguing in the
individual
Supreme Court right now to strike it down. That would do away with pre-existing conditions.
So that we can do new health care.
But you've been promising a new health care plan. I interviewed you in June of last year. You said the health care plan would come in 2 weeks. You told Chris Wallace that this summer it would come in 3 weeks. You promised an executive order on pre-existing.
I have it already.
But you've been trying to strike down pre-existing conditions.
I have it already, and it's a much better plan for you, and it's a much better plan.
If this election goes and say it goes the way where Trump's policy is elected, the goal behind that is going to be the elimination of the current health care that we have in place, so people won't have health care. Now, I think to what this lady was speaking on, and whatever the condition she had what made it like kind of stand out. If she doesn't have the medication that she needs within, I think she said like a 36-hour period, she would die.
Yeah, if she doesn't take medication like within like every 72 hours,
Correct.
she will. It's fatal.
Now, to know that the main goal of the current policy was to eliminate the healthcare currently in place without a plan in place to back it up. How many other millions of people are in situations, not just already have a chronic condition, but if something were, God forbid, to happen to them during that time where you're trying to figure something out, how can you try to take away a plan that's currently in place without having something to replace it? To me, is like one of the worst parts of what they're trying to do. And it's already in place right now. If he was to win, the next thing is going to be the elimination of this healthcare system for everyone instantly.
I think it is. I think that's a little too broad, in my opinion. I know they're trying to get rid of certain parts of the rest of Obamacare, and I think it's because the Obamacare as it currently works doesn't really work for everybody, and Obamacare is a really bad. It's good for a very small amount of people. It's very bad for a lot of other people.
I disagree.
And I'm 100%.
But let's say if it was bad, how do you take away bad and replace it with nothing? Nothing worse than bad.
No. I think it's unfortunate that it's a double-edged sword, because you shouldn't keep bad because bad is horrible, but you shouldn't then have nothing behind it. Here's where I agree. I do think that they have, and I think this is politics as usual, because I think Democrats want to keep this knowing it's bad, but they want to say they're doing something. And Republicans don't want this, but don't want to give it on something else. There has to be between the two of them a way where you can cover these people without breaking the bank. There has to be.
It can't be that easy, because it's been how many years? They were trying to repeal and replace, as they say, without a replacement for 8 years. It's been another 4 years now, and they still have not even come up with a plan to put something else in place.
No. By the way,
it can't be that easy.
No. I know you'd be surprised if you have political will to get it done. There's obviously something somewhere, but it needs to be done in a way where you don't take care of one person and screw over 99.
All right, this has been another episode of the New Labor Movement Show. I am one of your hosts, Troy.
I'm still Ray.
And we are signing out. Peace out, people.
You're saying it was going to disappear.
It is going to disappear. It's going to disappear. I still say
if we don't take action, correct?
No, I still say it. It's going to disappear.